Hi, LionBolt Kingdom. So back in 2021, before I wrote Detective King, I was an animation major at DePaul University in Chicago. The final class of the degree was the capstone project, in which I would create a short film from start to finish over the course of 2 quarters, or from September 2020 to March 2021. I thought I'd look back on the creation of my capstone project, The Color Thief, as a way of demonstrating what goes into the process of animation from the first storyboards to the finished product. If you're new here, I'm LionBolt, animator, artist, and author of the YA urban fantasy and mystery series Detective King. You can learn more about my books or find information about art commissions in the description. The first step, of course, is deciding on a premise. Right from the start, I had to consider scope. How big of a project would this be? What was within my abilities that could be done within the time frame? Even with half a year, it wouldn't be realistic to make anything longer than a few minutes. The other consideration was what kind of short did I want to make? I would be working on this thing for months. It needed to be something I cared about, and for me, that meant it couldn't just be a brief bit of animation with no real purpose behind it. It would have been much easier to dedicate myself to just a minute or two of animation with no dialogue and minimal story. But if you know me, I'm a storyteller, so I decided early on that I would be ambitious and develop a 3-act story, challenging myself to come up with something that could be done within such a short amount of time. Because this was an animation project, the visuals were an important consideration for me. And so I knew I wanted to play with color early on, and I definitely wanted to incorporate magic and imagination. I worked out outlines and storyboards of the concepts I was playing with. Originally, I envisioned a sort of dystopian world that could only be saved by a group of kids and their imaginations, but that proved to be too big a concept to work with such tight time constraints. Simplifying things, I focused on one main character, Ori, a magical sidekick, and a quest to return color to a colorless world. For structure, I went with the basic hero's journey format. The main character is thrust into an adventure, is helped by a mentor, and grows his skills so that he can accomplish his goal, ending his quest back where he started, but having grown as a character. This was workshopped further. For instance, there was originally a witch character that Ori meets in the woods who teaches him about magic and such, but it slowed down the film too much and I ended up cutting her, instead focusing on making the thief a more compelling character. Simplicity is often the best course of action, especially under tight time constraints. The new story was about a girl stealing a crystal that gave color to the world. Ori's color is restored by a creature he calls Niji, who gives him the power to create things out of his imagination. The two of them go on a journey to get the crystal back and return the color and inspiration to the world. In developing the visual style, I was tasked with making mood boards of what I envisioned the main character to look like and how I envisioned the setting. From there, I made concept art of the main characters, Ori, Niji, and the thief, as well as the primary locations of the film, namely the city, which I call Paletta. With all of that figured out, the main characters and plot settled, and a basic storyboard hammered out, I was able to write the script. I put the storyboard together and recorded the dialogue myself to see how it would all fit together and how long the project would end up being, so I can make adjustments and make sure it wouldn't be bigger than I could reasonably take on.
Haha, take that. Hi, Mom.
The film ended up being about 6 minutes, which was definitely on the longer end. I think there were only a couple projects longer than mine, if I remember correctly. But I had cut about all I could while still making for a complete, coherent story. With that settled, I could start the casting process. Our capstone class partnered with an acting class to provide us with a stock of voice actors who could audition for our projects. It was really fun to hear the auditions and choose who I thought fit. As I mentioned, mine was an ambitious project, so I had 5 roles to fill. Ori.
Will you believe in a happy ending with me?
The thief.
I used to love stories. The worlds they unlocked in my imagination.
Ori's mom.
My heart tells me a story, and the painting is how I retell it.
Friend 1 and friend 2.
Ori! Wait for us, Ori!
Niji just made noises, and I was satisfied with the performance I gave in the animatic version, so I just kept that in rather than take on another actor to reproduce the same sounds I had already made. Once everyone was cast, I met with each of my actors to go over what I needed from their roles and any suggestions I had based on their auditions. All of this was over Zoom, as it was 2020, mind you. I was the director of this film, so it was my responsibility to direct my actors as needed. I was mostly hands-off, allowing the actors to give their performances, and I would give suggestions for re-records or any additional sound bites not in the script, like grunts and yells, as needed. In the end, I was happy with all of the performances, and it was great to hear my script and my characters be brought to life like that. I was also given a team of sound designers who would work on the sound effects for the film. They, along with a friend of mine who I hired to compose the music, were a vital part of the production, and I regularly met with them to finish the project, even after the class had technically ended. Sound design is a very underappreciated part of film and animation production. It's vital and easy to screw up. People are actually more sensitive to poor audio quality than visuals, so while getting the visuals right is essential, you can't skimp on the audio side of things either. Not only were my sound team in charge of making sound effects, but also mixing, so that the effects, music, and dialogue all complemented each other and could be heard above each other. Admittedly, we did run out of time to finish everything by the end of class. Thankfully, we finished it afterward, though I think some things could have been tweaked better if we'd had more time. All of this pre-production took place in the first half of the 2-quarter-long capstone class. At DePaul, we have 13-week quarters rather than semesters, which I liked because it gave us more classes, but the downside is it gets very fast-paced. Anyway, with all the preparations complete, I could start actually animating somewhere around late October, if I remember correctly. This was the hard part, and it would take me deep into the new year. The animation process consisted of rough animation, basically sketches connecting the storyboards in the animatic. From there I did the line art for the keyframes, which are the basic movements of the animation, which are then strung together with in-between frames. Then next came colors, the basic colors of each character, which I then added to with highlights and shadows. Last in my process was the backgrounds and some effects for the magic and such. Different scenes got completed at different rates, with some easy scenes being totally finished months before the most difficult scenes even reached the coloring phase. For class, we had milestones where we needed to get certain amounts of the film completed by each milestone so that we could stay on schedule. I admit I wasn't very time efficient with how I approached the animation, often drawing too many frames by hand rather than the more efficient rigging method, which I had little experience with. Keep in mind, I had only been in the animation major for about a year before capstone. I was the equivalent of a sophomore in a senior class, which is why I like to say I speedran the degree. I'll speak more about the degree and how I feel about it in another video. I worked with a program called TV Paint, which was the primary program we used in our classes prior to capstone. DePaul had transitioned away from Adobe Animate about a year or two before I joined the major. The biggest challenges in animation were consistency, making the animation look smooth, obviously the time constraints. Animation takes a long time and a lot of effort, and the fact that I was managing everything on my own, working with people remotely, and animating what was a very large project by myself with comparatively little experience. I was helped by having the support of the other capstone students and my professor, who essentially took on a producer role to help me to keep on track. But in the end, the film wasn't complete at the end of the class. I had until the big capstone screening in June to really finish the thing, and I got to that finish line just in time, ensuring every frame had lines, color, effects, and that the sound and music synced up correctly to each and every scene. The color thief isn't perfect. I'm not confident in a lot of the animation, and I wish I had more of the fundamentals of animation down before I'd gotten to that point, but that was unavoidable. I am proud of the story I told. It's simple, but it embodies my philosophy in telling stories to bring a positive message, one of embracing your creativity and using it to make the world a better place. From From the first concept to the finished product, it took almost a year to fully produce a 6-minute film, which gives you an idea of just how much goes into animation, especially without the benefit of a team of animators. For my efforts, I was able to graduate, and Color Thief did receive a semi-finalist status at the Focus International Film Festival, which is what those laurels on the thumbnail are all about. I hope this gave you a sense of the animation process, how it all works, what to expect as an animation student, and if nothing else, what some of the stuff behind me in the background refers to. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions about animation or the Color Thief, and if you're an animator, if you have any comments or advice about the animation process. You can also like and subscribe for more content on animation, digital art, storytelling, writing, and more. I'll see you next time, and I hope you go out and create something today. To quote the Color Thief, your heart has a story to tell.